And now we are starting the Spanish non-lucrative visa webinar. The way I structure this webinar is a timeline: before the application, during the application, and after approval. And we're going to see, we're going to talk about definitions, consulates, third-party services for outsourcing of this visa, status as a tourist in Spain, resident status, tax, some tax considerations, which is very important, eligibility for the non-lucrative visa, and we're going to go through all the requirements and talk about them in depth and how you need to apply with each of them. Then during the application, we're going to look at the timing, what comes first, what is most difficult, which of the parts of the procedure you should start with, because there are the longer ones, there are the most difficult ones, and application process. And then after the approval, how do you arrive to Spain, the renewal process, if you want to stay in Spain after 5 years, long-term residence, citizenship, if you want to have the Spanish passport, and potentially transition to work permit. Disclaimer here, the content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Check your specific consulate requirements. At the end of this presentation, we're going to have a Q&A session. You can ask your questions anytime in the chat box. Make sure to add your question mark at the end. What is Spainguru.es? The objective is facilitating the relocation process for English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014. As you can see there, we have very nice reviews. We started gathering the reviews not long ago, May last year. But as you can see, people are quite happy with the information provided and also the services that we recommend. So you're in good hands. You can use Spainguru two ways. If you apply for different visas, in this case, non-lucrative visa, you can use professional services to help you out with the procedure. And you can find vetted, personally vetted partners, immigration experts, also tax advisors, financial planners, and many more services like compliant visa compliant health insurance for the non-lucrative visa, medical certificates, sworn translators, apostille services, all those services that I have personally vetted and I have been recommending for several years. So they're very, very well tested and stood the test of time. But it is not only about paid services. You can also use Spainguru for free, absolutely for free. There's so many free resources. Probably the most important is the community. Okay, there's many Facebook group that I admin with an aggregated total of 140,000 members. Spanish immigration group with 35K, the dedicated non-lucrative visa group, digital nomad visa group, and many more groups that you can join today if you haven't done so. And I highly recommend you doing so. But you can also join a free weekly newsletter that I send every Monday with the top discussions, a summary of the discussions in that community, the most watched video from the YouTube channel that has more than 820 videos, and probably half of them are about the non-lucrative visa in Spain. And all these resources are for free, and you can opt out anytime. And there's a blog with more than 1,600 articles. So all that, you can do it for free. And if you choose to use professional help, then of course, you are welcome to do so. And even if you do it yourself, you will need some translations, probably private apostille services are interesting for you to use. So yes, that's how you can use Spainguru. Now, before the application, what is the Spanish non-lucrative visa? It is a visa for non-EU citizens who can financially support themselves and who don't need to work in Spain. The law and regulations that define this visa, first of all, and on the top in the hierarchy, you have the Ley Orgánica, the main law, for 2000, okay? And then the regulation of that law. The main law is very generic. The regulation comes with the details on how to apply what the law wants, okay, for the and goes more into the specifics. Now, the regulation is lower in the hierarchy, okay, in the legal system. What happened in November, okay, in 19 November 2024? The regulation was approved, a new regulation that will take effect on May 20th, 2025. So we're still under the current or old, if you will, regulation of the law. And the new regulation takes effect after May 20th, 2025. Now, let's talk about the consulates in the USA, UK, and Canada. It's very important that you understand that you can't apply for the non-lucrative visa anywhere you want. You need to be a legal resident within the area that your Spanish consulate serves. For instance, if you are from Atlanta, Georgia, your consulate is Miami, okay? If you are from close to Manchester, for example, your consulate is Manchester. You can't apply from London, okay? If you want to find dedicated pages for each of the consulates in these three countries, you can go on Spainguru.es, Spanish visa, Spain non-lucrative visa, and find your Spanish consulate in these 3 different countries. Why is it interesting that you also check the dedicated pages on Spainguru? Because I aggregate all the information specific to that consulate, like first-hand experiences and any information that has mentioned that specific consulate. It is aggregated in these dedicated pages for each of the consulates. And as you probably heard, the different consulates are very, very different. They have different interpretations of the rules, and sometimes they have different requirements. They're tending to be streamlined and to be standardized, but as of today, they may be very different. So it's important to understand what's going on in your specific consulate. Now, what is BLS International? Most of the consulates, I think all of them in the UK and in the US, except for New York right now, use a third-party service to process the non-lucrative visa. Who do they use? This Indian company is a huge company with operations in more than 64 countries, and they have an office, a physical office in each of the cities where the Spanish consulates are. Now, when you will apply for the non-lucrative visa, you need to understand whether your consulate is working with this service for the specific non-lucrative visa, because sometimes elsewhere, they work maybe with BLS only for the Schengen visa, for the tourist visa, but not for the non-lucrative visa, you see? So make sure you understand that. And that information, you will find it in the consulate page for the non-lucrative visa. So when I mentioned, for example, the Miami consulate, really Miami is working with BLS International for the non-lucrative visa. So really I'm talking about the BLS office in Miami, right? Now, visa requirements for Spain. When you enter Spain as a tourist or the Schengen area as a tourist, British, USA, and Canada citizens can stay in Spain and other Schengen countries for up to 90 days within a 6-month period without needing a tourist visa. The Schengen area is an area of 28 European countries, which is internally borderless, right? So you can travel inside, let's say, without border or passport controls. That can happen, but they are exceptional. Now, some nationalities require a Schengen visa to enter this area, okay, as tourists. For example, the Philippines, yes. So make sure to understand if you need a tourist visa, if you plan to enter Schengen area without a visa, okay? But if you are from the US, British, Canada, Australia, you don't need a Schengen visa. Now, if you are a non-EU citizen and you plan to stay for more than 90 days in Spain, in this case, you must secure a temporary or long-term visa versus a tourist visa, okay? The non-lucrative visa is a temporary visa that grants you a 3-month window period to enter Spain, and then you have 30 days to obtain your residency, your non-lucrative residency, okay? Why is it called temporary visa? Because it's a visa or residency that will grant you 5 years maximum of residency in Spain, and then we can see that there is an exceptional renewal of 2 more years. But basically, all the residencies that are under 5 years in Spain are called temporary visas. After that, you get, potentially, if you comply with the requirements, a long-term visa. Now, citizens from EU countries and associate countries like Switzerland, Norway, etc., as well as spouses of EU passport holders or associate countries, are exempt from this type of requirements, this type of visa. But if they want to stay in Spain more than 90 days, they need to fulfill other conditions that are much better, much easier, okay? For example, the non-EU spouses of EU citizens can apply for a community family card to reside in Spain for more than 3 months, okay? And as we said, the requirements are much easier. The residence is valid for 5 years without renewal periods. It includes a work permit, something that the non-lucrative visa doesn't include, and so on and so on. It is much easier. They also have less difficult or high financial requirements. So if you are an EU passport holder or married to one, okay, or you are under a pareja de hecho or Commonwealth couple, legal couple, to one EU passport holder, or you have the possibility to obtain a EU passport. For example, a lot of British people tell me, I have a grandfather from Ireland. Should I wait? And because I have the possibility to get the Ireland passport, I said, probably it's a good idea that you obtain your EU passport before and don't do the non-lucrative visa. So in such case, this webinar and this visa is not really for you. But if you're a non-EU passport holder that are not in that situation, you need to get a visa. In this case, we're speaking about the Spanish non-lucrative visa and residence. Let's go to taxes. Taxes are very important, and you need to understand what the taxes implications are even before you take the decision to come to Spain. And the most important concept probably is tax residence. Because when you become a tax resident in Spain, you must pay tax on your global income and potentially on the net value of your assets. If any of the three conditions apply. The most important and the one that applies for 99% of cases is if you spend over 183 days physically in Spain within a year, and those days don't need to be consecutive, from January 1st to December 31st, you will become a tax resident in Spain. And it doesn't matter your status. If you enter Spain for 10 days at the beginning of the year as a tourist, and then you spend 173 days in the second half of the year under the non-lucrative visa, you have to add those two, and you will become that calendar year. Starting from January 1st, that same year, you will be a tax resident in Spain, and you will have to pay taxes for any taxable event to the Spanish tax authorities. And then there are two other conditions called your main economic activity or primary income source is in Spain, or if your family lives in Spain as well, you could also be considered a tax resident in Spain. We're going to have a couple of slides about taxes because there's so much misunderstanding about this. And I have a tax webinar as well that I highly recommend you to join. But this is important, I believe. Taxes overview. First, the income tax. Okay, residents are taxed on worldwide incomes, we said. There are progressive rates that range from 19% to 47%. They vary by region, not a lot, but they vary by region. There's a part from the regional part and a part that is national. And a very commonly asked question, round number. I am making 100K a year, and I see that the fifth bracket of tax charges 45%. Does this mean that I will get charged 45% on taxes on my 100K income? No, this is not how tax brackets work. Roughly, you're going to get taxed around 36, 37% on your 100K income. Ballpark figure without allowances or anything, but just so that you understand that it's not that bad. And we're going to look at how you calculate those. Then there is the Form 720, which is the reporting of foreign assets, that actually the deadline is very close from now. It's March 31st. And it's mandatory that you disclose your assets abroad for the different categories, totaling 50,000 euros. For example, if you have you have 10 bank accounts with 5,000 euros on each, the total for that category is 50,000 euros. You have to declare them. Then there is the wealth tax, okay, which is an annual tax on net assets value at December 31st, okay, that usually have an exemption that goes from 500,000 to 700,000 euros, okay. And then if you own a property in Spain, you can also you have an allowance of up to 300,000 on the value of your property in Spain, and also has progressive rates, okay. And this is important to understand that this is a regional tax, and depends where you live, you will have different allowances, and potentially you will have no wealth tax, okay? Or the threshold will be high. For example, in Madrid, the threshold is 3 million. It's not 700,000 euros, okay? And in Andalusia, it's 0% the wealth tax. But then the solidarity tax, it was something that was created a couple of years ago by the central government and applies nationally, okay, and kicks in at 3 million euros. It also has the same, let's say, an allowance of 700,000 euros. So really starts at 3.7 millions in value of assets. And also it's a progressive rate on the net value of assets. It's important to understand if your country has double taxation agreements. Both the USA and the UK have agreements in order to avoid getting taxed twice. And it's important to understand that the regional rules vary significantly. And of course, your personal circumstances make it very, very different. So it's important to consider consulting with a professional tax advisor that you can find on Spainguru.es. And as I said, this is a simple calculation on how the tax brackets work. For example, for 100K annual income, why you don't pay 45% tax? As you can see on the top, on the right of the screen, you have a table with different brackets that range from 19% to 47%. So if you make 100K a year, which I hope you do, the first 12,450 euros of those 100,000 that you make pay 19% tax. Then the next bracket pays 24. So you pay really like a average, let's say, or a median, that then goes down to 36% effective tax rate for 100K. And that's how the progressive tax brackets work. And this is also some calculation that I did. These are all ballpark figures and, for information purposes only. If you make 30K, you will pay 24% income tax, roughly, effective tax rate. And as you can see, progressively, you pay higher percentage with the more you make. getting to 36% if you make 100K. Now, enough about taxes overview. Let's go back to the non-lucrative visa and let's go through the documentation. They will ask you an address in Spain, okay? And that will depend on the consulate, how strict they are. Most consulates, they just want to know to which province you will move to, and it will be enough to say, I'm moving to Seville province, I'm moving to Valencia province. But some consulates, for example, Chicago, Boston, they will ask you to have a rental contract in advance or a property deeds, okay, which makes things more difficult. Now, I have an interview I know a Manero, who is an expert immigration lawyer from Stern Abogados that I also recommend on Spainguru, and she says that for the consulates that are asking these rental contracts, she never provides it and she explains it why, etc., and then they stop asking for it. But for the people who do it themselves and they apply, they are usually providing these rental contracts. So it is a bit of a gray area, and it depends a lot on the different interpretations of the rules, how strict they are. Then there is addressing your country of residence. As I said before, you need to prove that you live within the area that those consulates serve, so that you get assigned a specific consulate where you can apply for this visa. For example, in the US, you will have to provide a copy of your driving license. Then you will need to prove sufficient financial means to support yourself and dependents, if applicable, without working. Have comprehensive health insurance from a company authorized to operate in Spain, or if you're a UK retiree, you can use the S1 form that grants you access to public healthcare in Spain, and then you don't have to get a private health insurance. Clean criminal background check, medical certificate, and if you're bringing your spouse or dependent children, if you're not, you don't need to get this. But if you are coming with a spouse and or dependent children, you will need marriage certificate, a new original, okay, or a new copy of the original, apostille and son translated, and also new birth certificates for each of your kids. And in most cases, you will have to explain that you will not engage in any work or professional activities in Spain at the moment of application. It's very important that the consulates don't have any doubt that you will start working, okay, or you'll continue to work. And then, not always, letter of intent. You can find templates for letters of intent on Spainguru.es. And then, depending on the consulate or BLS office, they will require photos. And of course, you will have to pay fees for each of the applicants. It's filled forms, etc., etc. We're going to go deeper into each one of these ones. Now, the most important one, money. Money matters. The financial requirements. And there I have 2024 because really they haven't changed. 2025 is exactly the same. And you need to show that you have, you need to show proof that you have sufficient funds, okay, to sustain yourself and dependents during the time of your residence, okay. Since the first residence permit is for 1 year, you have to prove that you have sufficient funds for that first year. But when you do the renewal, the renewals are for 2 more years. For each renewal grants your residence for 2 years. So you will have to prove that you have the funds for those 2 years. This is why a lot of people say, oh, you need to prove double the amount when you renew. It is a bit tricky. You need to prove the same amount, but for 2 years. So if you have savings, you will have to have double. Now, how much money you need to show, including savings and or regular passive income? The main applicant has to have 400% of the IPREM index in 2024, and each dependent 100% of the IPREM index in 2024. That translated to euros is 28,800 euros for the main applicant and 702,000 euros. 7,200 euros for each of the dependents. Therefore, a couple is 28,800 euros plus 7,200 euros. A couple would be 36,000 euros that you need to prove. Savings and or passive incomes. Can be savings or passive incomes like pension withdrawals, rental income, dividends. And be careful with rental income. Depending on the consulate, you have to be careful about the rental income because sometimes they don't like it that much. Now, you will have to show bank statements, okay, and depending on the consulate, how many months you need to show, it will depend. For example, some consulates, they require 12 months, some other 6, some other 3. And documentation from your bank, where you have the money or where you are receiving the passive income. Some consulates will also ask for tax returns, especially if you bring dependents, and especially and for sure if you bring adult children. That means dependent children that are older than 18 years old, showing tax returns where you prove that they depend on you is pretty much standard. And as we said, you will need double the amount for the renewal, but there are regional variations. For example, in Madrid, you don't have to show double the amount in savings when you renew, for example. But in most regions, they will ask you for double the amount in a 2-year period. But we mentioned the IPREM index. What is this index? Okay, all the money calculations for the non-lucrative visa are based on the IPREM index. This is an index that gets published every year and depends on the national budget. The national budget depends on the political agreement of parties in Spain. So you can see there the progression since 2004. Some years it just remained flat. Most of the time it's because there is no political agreement for new budget for the country, and therefore the IPREM was frozen. In this case, this is the case now. Okay, there is no political agreement between the parties, and the IPREM is not updated, but it could update anytime. So if you plan to be in Spain for 5 years under the non-lucrative residence, you have to calculate your budget accordingly, because the IPREM may go up. As you can see, the progression is very clear. It never goes down, especially with inflation. And when you do renewals, the renewal financial requirements will be calculated according to the new IPREM. Therefore, for example, if the IPREM goes in 2026 to 650 euros per month, maybe the main applicant no longer is 28,800 euros, it goes to 31,200 euros. Okay, and if you need to renew and you only have savings, that will be times 2. So be careful and budget accordingly. Now, the $1 million question: can I work remotely? Yes, for non-Spanish companies under the non-lucrative residence. And I am just repeating here what Ainhoa Manero of Stern Abogados, immigration expert, immigration lawyer, that she did my nationality procedure years ago. I'm originally from Argentina and I got the Spanish nationality. She says it is a legal ambiguity, because when the non-lucrative visa was created many years ago, it was not, working remotely or being a digital nomad wasn't something that was very mainstream. Now it is. It's very common. And the non-lucrative residence didn't have this into account, and it doesn't really prohibit it. Okay, it is legal ambiguity, really. The thing is that a couple of years ago, the digital nomad visa came out, and it is the type of visa that you should get, and I highly recommend you doing so, in case you are working remotely. Okay, but the fact is that a Supreme Court ruling said to someone who was working remotely that he was right, and he could keep the non-lucrative residence working remotely for a non-Spanish company, and it is very easy to defend if that is your case. The thing is that the consulates are applying a very strict interpretation of the rules, okay? And if they have absolutely the slightest doubt that you are working or you plan to work under the non-lucrative visa or residence, they will deny you ipso facto, okay? So very, very careful with that. But I know dozens of people who are working remotely under the non-lucrative residence. They pay their taxes. They don't pay Social Security. They have their private health insurance. And of course, they comply with the non-lucrative residence requirements for funding. They have their savings. They have their passive income, but they still work remotely. And they pay their taxes in Spain, as they are Spanish tax residents. They pay taxes on their global income, but the tax authorities and the immigration authorities don't talk to each other. Okay? And they renew their visas, their residencies, every year, and I see it, and you can see even YouTubers out there who are doing this, okay, until they get their nationalities or they get the long-term permits. So this is a situation about working remotely for non-Spanish companies. This is the legal situation, and I highly recommend you to watch this interview, this video. You have there the QR code, where don't take the words from me, but from a legal expert. And of course, I'm not recommending you to work remotely under the non-lucrative residence or visa. Okay, please don't do it. Don't do it. Okay. And this is another example on how crazy the differences are between the different consulates. For example, not too long ago, like 2 months ago, the Edinburgh consulate in the UK included in the requirements the situation in which someone could work, okay, could work and still obtain the non-lucrative visa. Special types of work, they said, because of the nature of the work. For those who wish to keep their job in the UK while living in Spain, evidence that due to the nature of their job, you can effectively reside in Spain and at the same time carry out your job in the UK. Okay, and this shouldn't be working remotely, etc. So this is meant for people who work in the oil rigs in the Northern Sea, really, and someone who is working in the oil rig got the non-lucrative visa and is traveling every now and then back and forth to the North Sea to make some money and still is under the non-lucrative visa. And this is the Edinburgh consulate, and only the Edinburgh consulate. But as you can see, some people can even work recognized by the consulate, because really the law permits this amount of interpretation. Really, the Spanish non-lucrative visa and residence, it's very flexible, and that gives the space to the consulates to have different interpretations, unfortunately. Now, let's talk about private health insurance requirements. The insurance conditions, as we said, if you're a UK retiree, you can use the S1 if you want, okay, to have public access to the Spanish healthcare system. If you're not, then you will have to get a private health insurance. But not every policy is compliant. The conditions to be compliant are it doesn't have to have co-payments, and I add here reimbursements because several consulates specifically mention that they cannot have reimbursements. Not all of them mention it. For example, Houston mentions it in the US, and then other consulates outside the US and the UK. So it is, if you, the reimbursements, I would say, like, if you want to be on the safe side, the best is that you don't have reimbursements in your policy. But for sure, no co-payments, no waiting periods, full coverage in whole Spanish territory, and also by the different medical disciplines, full coverage you should have, with nuances. And we're going to talk about that. And in 99% of the cases, you will have to pay a full year in advance because the health insurance company needs this payment so they can issue a certificate of coverage for the full year in advance in Spanish that it is needed to provide when you submit your paperwork for the Spanish non-lucrative visa. Frequently asked questions. Are my medicines covered? No. Under private health insurance, you have to pay retail price for any medicines that you buy in Spain. Good news is that they are usually much cheaper than in the US and also in the UK, as committee members report. What should be the health insurance start date? So there is no single answer to this, but in most cases, when you select the intended date to enter Spain, for example, the 15th of April, that same month, your health insurance should be valid. And usually the health insurance start dates are on the first day of each month. Therefore, should be for the 1st of April. Okay. Some people argue that you have to have a valid health insurance at the time of your appointment at the BLS office or consulate. Okay. But in my opinion, this is even a bit dangerous, because if your appointment is much earlier than your intended date, you will not get covered for the last months of your residency, and the consulate may say, you're not covered the full year. You need to provide a paper proving that you're gonna get automatically extended, etc., etc. So this is the nuanced answer to this question. Are there health insurance for older than 75 years of age? Yes, there are. In Spainguru, you can find my recommended Adeslas exclusive agent who can get you one. And also there are other companies that provide even up to 99 years of age. What if I have pre-existing conditions? Okay, so this is the very connecting to the condition of full coverage. Okay, this is very nuanced. Depending on the severity of your pre-existing conditions, if you, for example, have had cancer in the last 5 years, usually no health insurance will cover you, and you won't be able to apply for the non-lucrative visa because you can't get the health insurance. Unfortunately, it's as cruel and brutal as I say it. Now, if you have had cancer and is in remission before 5 years, then you will potentially get coverage, but maybe with a exclusion of that specific pre-existing condition. Now, most of people have some sort of pre-existing conditions that are not so severe, and usually the health insurance will cover for everything but exclude the pre-existing condition and still be able to issue the certificate of coverage in Spanish for you to get the Spanish non-lucrative visa. But if you have a problem related to your pre-existing conditions, the health insurance will not cover it, and you will have to pay everything out of pocket, okay? And then connecting to the next frequently asked question, can I pay into the Spanish public system? Yes. What is interesting about this? Your pre-existing conditions will get covered once you are in the Spanish public system. This is called joining the Convenio Especial. It is a bit different because each region has their own health system. I have content about this on Spainguru.es. You will pay 60 euros per month if you're under 65 years of age, or 157 euros over 65 years of age. And as far as I understand, in Catalonia region, it is actually free and immediate. Okay, but don't quote me on that. I have to find out a bit more about this. But this is the main rule about the Spanish public system. Can I use my current health insurance from the UK and USA? Short answer is, if it's NLD compliant, yes. The long answer is, I highly don't recommend it, because there are several denials because of different blocks on the road. The most important one, the certificate of coverage, has to be in Spanish. You will have to translate it, and it has to have the right wording. And usually, the companies that are not Spanish don't know about this. And they could include that there are reimbursements, that there are co-payments. They could be potentially considered travel insurances because they are not based in Spain, but they have a nice, great coverage in Spain, but travel insurances are not accepted, and so on and so on. So long answer, my recommendation is no, use a Spanish approved company and avoid headaches, okay? And they're usually much cheaper also, as people from the USA report. Can I apply with a UK S1 form if I am a UK retiree? The answer is yes. Do I need a Spanish bank account to get health insurance for the non-lucrative visa? The answer is no, you don't need a Spanish bank account. And if you're working with someone who demands that you have one, it is a red flag, in my opinion. Can I pay on a monthly basis? The answer is usually no, 99% of cases, no. Can there be any reimbursements? As I said, a few consulates specifically say there shouldn't be any reimbursements. And what is the difference between co-payments and reimbursements? Co-payment is that when you go to the doctor, half of the bill you have to pay from your pocket, and the other half is paid by the company, by the health insurance company. And reimbursements is the cost of the doctor is covered, let's say, but when you see the doctor, you have to take the money out of your pocket, pay the doctor, take the bill to your health insurance company, and then get a refund. This is also not accepted in several consulates, so be careful. And what are the largest Spanish health insurance companies? Adeslas, ASA, Sanitas, Asisa Salud, AXA, DKV, Caser, Mafre, and many more. Now, which are the most important ones? Adesla is the biggest one by far. You know, it is as big as the sum of the second and the third, Sanitas and Asisa. Okay, and then there is DKV. So Adesla is the biggest, and if you want to talk to like at no cost for you, no extra cost for you, to a recommended exclusive agent from Adeslas, you can find him on Spainguru.es. It is absolutely free for you to talk to him, and he's also Mr. Carlos Blanco. He's also an immigration lawyer and knows the Spanish non-lucrative visa process like the palm of his hand. I don't know if you say this in English, but he can also recommend about timings, etc., etc. So yes, definitely someone to talk to, even if you don't hire the health insurance. Medical certificates, related but completely different. This requirement it has nothing to do with the health insurance. There is a one-page certificate that needs to be signed by a doctor, okay? That states that you don't have infectious diseases according to the protocol of 2005. Now, this certificate has a 3-month validity in every country, okay? But I'm going to point out the differences between the USA and the UK and Canada, okay? The biggest difference is that in the UK, you have to apostille this certificate. A lot of people say, well, you can't apostille official documents, but documents that are not official from official government offices. Look, in the UK, you have to apostille it. Very important, put it inside your head, you need to apostille it. In the USA, no apostille. In Canada, no apostille. I only know the UK that needs the apostille. Now, huge recommendation, use the template provided by your specific consulate. So you make sure that there is no friction there. Some of the templates that each of the consulates provide come also in Spanish, as you can see there on the right, top in English, bottom in Spanish. Make sure the doctor signs both parts, doesn't leave blank any of those, okay? And if the doctor signs both of them, you will save the sworn translation because it is already in Spanish. If you're in the UK, you will still have to apostille it, but you will save the sworn translation. In the UK, as we said, in order to be able to apostille it, the doctor needs to be registered at the FCDO, okay, or the Foreign Ministry, or Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the UK, and then you can apostille it. And as we said, always sworn translate if it's only in English. Make sure that the doctor signs, and if the doctor has a stamp, add the stamp. In the USA, it needs to be printed, okay, with the doctor's letterhead, and it has to look official, okay, and the signature of the doctor and some sort of stamp where it says registered doctor and a number of registration, and make sure that it's signed by the doctor and not the person in the front desk, okay, it has to be the doctor. I'm telling you all this because I hear about people getting denied because of these issues. Now, you can find UK FCDO compliant medical certificates on Spainguru.es with a discount using ZoomDoc, which is fully online. And also you can find a Spanish doctor on Spainguru.es that is accepted in most consulates that you don't need to apostille nor sworn translate. So it can be very advantageous. First frequently asked question, my doctor won't sign the medical certificate template. What can I do? First option, change doctor. Okay. Some doctors, they will ask also to do blood tests and crazy stuff. And that if I were you, I would avoid. Okay. My doctor is not FCDO registered. Is his certificate valid in the UK? No, it needs to be registered. Some doctors choose to get registered when you go with this certificate and they see an opportunity to make more money, probably, and they get registered. And then after they get registered, it takes usually just a few days, and then you can send it to apostille. How do I know the Spanish doctor certificate is accepted at my consulate? So it should be accepted everywhere. The problem is that beginning of last year, I believe, Manchester consulate started to require that the person was physically present in Spain at the time of issuance of the Spanish doctor certificate, and only Manchester. Okay. Then there was San Francisco and I think Lisbon. I'm not sure. So the best you can do if you don't have the but for example, Miami is widely accepting this. Edinburgh, London are accepting the medical doctor certificate, even if you're not physically present in Spain at the time of issuance. Okay. Still, you can contact the doctor on Spainguru.es, just fill the form, tell the consulate where you're applying from, okay, and the doctor will tell you, yes, my certificate is being accepted in your consulate or not. Okay, so it's also an option that you have in case that you don't want to use your normal practitioner, let's say. And this is a table where you can see the differences basically between the countries. The UK, you need to apostille the certificate, and always you need to sworn translate in case it's not in Spanish. And the Spanish doctor doesn't need apostille or sworn translation because it is an official doctor from Spain who issues a certificate fully in Spanish that is understood perfectly by any consulate, obviously. Now, let's talk about the clean criminal background check. The document that takes the longest to obtain, usually, unless you married in Trinidad and Tobago, Cyprus, and you have to get a marriage certificate from those places, and those places take long. Usually, the background check or the ACRO in the UK take the longest. Okay, so you should start with them. It must be clean during the last 5 years, squeaky clean, nothing. Okay, otherwise it could be a denial. In the ACRO FBI background check, you need to apostille them. In FBI background check, it needs to be a federal apostille, okay? And both of them, they need to be sworn translated. It has a 6-month validity, okay? The police checks in any country, unless they state less time of validity. Yeah, basically you need to sworn translate it all in any case. Now, frequently asked questions. Am I still eligible with records on my background check? So it depends what type of records you have. Now, if you serve conviction time and the crimes are very severe, even if they happened decades ago, it's a denial, usually. Okay, so always get a lawyer. In this case, if you have doubts that your records could be stopped, get a lawyer. Okay. Am I still eligible with a no live trace in the ACRO? So you cannot see what you did. You just have a stepped down record called no live trace. In this case, this is for the UK, the consulates are asking an explanation of what is under the no live trace, something that you can get from the ACRO office or the police, and you have to provide that. I recently asked Ainhoa Manero of Stern Abogados about what happens with criminal records. For example, some criminal records have been in your background check for many decades, and you could not delete them. The lawyer, what does is to prove that same crime that you committed, what is the counterpart in the Spanish system? Yes, translated to Spanish system. And if that record in the Spanish system should be deleted, then it proves that the record that you have from your background check in your originating country should be deleted and should not be considered, if you understand me. So the lawyers also do these kind of things that can make it work, even if you have the record there and you cannot delete it or expunge it. Can I expedite the background check federal apostille in the US? Yes and no. The expedite official procedure stopped in 2020 with COVID, but there are private services that have an expedite process, which is a walk-in into Washington proper office. And Spainguru has partnered with Monument Visa, who does offer this service. And it takes, I think, a week, okay, just to obtain your apostille. Can I notarize the background check and use state apostille instead in the US? People have done this in the past. They got approved, but then started to get denied, all of them. So no, you shouldn't do it. Always use federal apostille. Where can I have my fingerprints taken in the US? You can get specific forms, paper forms that you put your wet fingerprints on them and send them by mail. or you can go to channelers called, or your post office, who can scan your fingerprints and send to the FBI. What if my fingerprints are illegible? Send me an email to hello@spainguru.es, and I can send you to specific content that I have with potential solutions for this. This happens especially to senior people that get their fingerprints fading out with age, unfortunately, and they have trouble to scan them. Now, some tips or some screenshots from people who are doing this criminal background check procedure. As you can see there in the UK, as of October, maybe I should update this a little bit. It was taking around between 15 days and 30 days to obtain the agro. Okay. And in Canada is very fast lately. And they had a lot of problems to get the apostille because Canada recently joined the Hague apostille like a year and a half ago. And it was taking months to obtain the apostille, and it was absolutely crazy. But now apparently this is solved and it's taking very short time. So congratulations to our Canadian friends. Proof of not working. So how do we call this visa? Usually the retirement visa, because most of people use this visa, the non-lucrative visa, to retire in Spain. But there are no age limits. You can come, if you're older than 18, you can apply as a main applicant for the non-lucrative visa. And you can be in working age, which is a very blurry term that usually consulates use to deny people. But if you are in the most common profile, you are a retiree, if you show proof of receipt of a pension, that's enough for the consulate to understand that you will not work. If you're still working, the most common thing to do in the UK is to quit work and obtain a P45 form and submit it with your application. In the US, submitting a resignation letter or termination letter from the employer, both sworn, translated, and notarized. If you're freelancers in the US, notarized affidavit promising not to work. In the UK, a letter from HMRC and accountants stating having ceased trading and the register from self-employment. And this is if you plan to quit before the application of the non-lucrative visa. Now, frequently asked question, should I quit before I get the visa? I'm going to talk more about that in the next slide. Is renting out a property considered a job? Size matters. If you have just one property or two and you're renting long-term, this is passive income. If you have 30 properties on Airbnb and the consulate reviewing your case considers that you have a business operation and you are doing the job directly, it could be considered active income and it would be a denial. So you need to, this is very blurry. It depends on how the person in the consulate reviewing your file will interpret it. If you have doubts that it could be considered a business operation, people suggest getting a manager to manage everything, and then you just get the passive income from that operation, and then you can explain it to the consulate, and then it will be considered to be passive income. Is investing in stocks considered active income? No, generally no. Can I volunteer while on an NLV? Okay, a lot of people say it is a non-lucrative visa, you cannot work. I think that is a confusion, okay? And I absolutely recommend people volunteering under a non-lucrative visa. Non-lucrative means that you cannot I don't know, in Spanish, lucrar is to make money, okay? So if you don't make money, you can do it, okay? It doesn't mean you can work but without getting paid, let's say. So if you volunteer, you won't get paid. You don't have any records of any payments, and you will help others, you will join a community, you will feel better, you will maybe learn more Spanish. It will be better for you and everyone else around you. So I highly recommend volunteering. Now, some person said, what if they pay me lunches or they pay me the flight tickets to go and volunteer? That is probably gray area and probably forbidden. You shouldn't accept those payments, maybe. No, that would be my explanation. Now, coming back to the still working at the time of application, it is a very, it depends on the consulate, the country and the consulate, how they deal with this. A lot of people want to work until the very end, or they don't want to quit because they don't know if they're going to get their visa granted, and so on. So the USA is much more receptive to this, or friendlier. In the UK, not so much. So I'm going to just explain the situation by quoting community members. In the UK, a P45 is one way to show that you stopped working, but so is a letter from your employer stating that you have resigned and will leave on a certain date. So a little bit in the future, okay? Some person showed this, but then they said it looks like it's a bit of a potluck if they accept a letter from HR department in place of a P45 if working to a last minute. So a lot of people said no, they wouldn't accept my an HR letter. They wanted my P45, or I was denied. So they rushed to obtain the P45 and submit it. Okay, this is the UK. And someone else posts, is it possible to take an employer's letter to BLS London to give a resignation date rather than a P45 to say a resignation will be in a month after BLS London interview? And someone answers, but for Manchester, we took letters of our employers to give our retirement dates. They accepted them on our 11th week now, but they're still waiting to be accepted. So it is a bit of a gray area in the UK about this. In the USA, they are much more welcoming with this situation. They expect people to work until the very last minute. And usually the official requirements state what you need to provide in that situation. For example, DC Consulate said, if the applicant is of working age and or employed, she can add a letter of termination from the employer stating that the applicant will no longer work for the company, or a sabbatical year acceptance letter from the employer. Sabbatical year, which is something that is not even mentioned in the UK. The termination letter must be in Spanish or include a Spanish version or be accompanied by an official translation into Spanish by a sworn translator. And someone said for the Los Angeles Consulate, the LA Consulate, now BLS office, as of this year, will accept a notarized letter of intent that states your plan on quitting upon obtaining the visa before leaving for Spain. And on Spainguru.ds, I have the several templates for this specific letter of intent, if you need one. But so that you understand how tricky this is the specific case of a Venezuelan national who applied for a non-lucrative visa at the Buenos Aires Consulate in Argentina, where I'm originally from. This person got denied their visa because in the consulate, they checked their LinkedIn and they saw some activity in LinkedIn. It's not clear what type of activity he showed in the LinkedIn, page. So be careful with that. He got denied and he decided to bring the consulate to court. The court is the Court of Madrid, and the Court of Madrid said the consulate is right. You were showing activity in your LinkedIn, and it's right that you should be denied of your non-lucrative visa. So be careful and have this in the back of your mind. When you apply the consulate, the job thing is very, very tricky. Then once your visa is granted and you comply with the requirements of a non-lucrative visa, we enter a gray area that I don't recommend you to go through. But this is the situation about work with a non-lucrative visa. Now, let's talk about marriage certificates, birth certificates, and non-married couples. Married couples need a valid and updated certificate that usually has a 6-month validity, usually. But always check official requirements. When I say any date here or period, careful. This can change by consulate. I could be wrong, okay? So always check the official requirements of your consulate in English, in Spanish, and BLS office. You have 3 requirements that may not be identical. Now, if you bring children, you will need their birth certificates, also updated original certificates. And if you got married somewhere else, Trinidad and Tobago, Cyprus, I heard South Africa, be careful because it takes a long time to obtain those new certificates, and you will need to get apostilled by the authorities who issued it, so in that local country, and the sworn translation from the language in which they are. If you got married in Turkey and you get the birth, or your child was born in Turkey, you will need to get an original Turkish birth certificate and apostilled and sworn translated. Now, non-married couples can apply, but you have to be careful because it also depends a lot on the consulate, how they take the proof of their relationship. If you are legal partners, this is the best proof, Commonwealth partnership or pareja de hecho in Spain, they will consider you're a couple and of course benefit from applying as a couple, as opposed to applying as 2 main applicants. If you have children together, joint accounts, this is good proof as well. Then less good proof that you're a couple, joint rental contracts, joint property deeds, photos of your trips, on holidays. These kind of things can make the case better, but still it will depend on how the person revising your file takes it. They always have to be apostilled, these certificates, in the country that issued them and sworn translated, Frequently asked question, what about adult children and ascendants? Yes, you can bring adult children, which is any child over 18 years old with no age limit, if you prove that they are part of the same family, so they are not married, and that they are financially dependent on you. And if you bring ascendants, you have to prove that they are financially dependent on you. And this is a slide talking more about adult children, but we're going to go to the next one. And if you want to know more about this, just send me an email and I will point you in the right direction. We have mentioned sworn translators. What are the sworn translators? Sworn translators are accredited by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This ministry is the only one who can appoint sworn translators. They pass a difficult exam to become certified, and each sworn translator has a unique registration number in their stamp. Their translations are accepted by all Spanish institutions, including consulates and BLS offices, of course, and translations are done remotely and signed with a legally valid e-signature. So very important, no physical mail is needed. You do everything by email. Okay, you scan your documents, you contact the sworn translator tells you when they can deliver, how much is the whole work, the price for the work, you pay, and then they deliver the translation. Okay, or basically that's how it works, and you print out that and you bring it to your application of the non-lucrative visa, and that should work. Can I use any translator from the American Translator Association? I say this because Miami Consulate mentions this association and includes the link to this association. And the answer is no. This association has nothing to do with the sworn translators appointed by Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Okay, so it is absolutely misleading, and still Miami has it in the requirements as a help for people. So only use appointed sworn translators. You can find recommended ones on Spainguru.es that do dozens of sets of documents for the non-lucrative visa every month. So you are in very, very good hands, and they are very affordable. So yes, I highly recommend you going to Spainguru.es. Can a sworn translator work with several language pairs? No, they can only be translated for one pair, for example, English, Spanish, and they cannot be sworn translated for different pairs. How much do sworn translators cost? Usually, the type of documents that go with a non-lucrative visa application is around 40 euros per page, depending on complexity. Okay, usually should be that. How much do sworn translator? What comes first, apostille, then sworn translation? This is also a chicken and egg question. A lot of people with different answers. I will tell you what a lawyer will always tell you. You want to be on the safe side? First, you obtain your original document. Then you obtain the apostille for that document, and then you send to the sworn translator the original document and the apostille, and you sworn translate both. Safe side. Why is this? Some people say in the UK, for example, the apostilles come also with the text in Spanish, but that text in Spanish doesn't include all the information from the original document. So if the person checking your file at the consulate has had a bad morning, can say that you haven't sworn translated the original document, the apostille, okay, and it could ask you to resend the document with the new apostille with a sworn translation, and this happens. Okay, so be careful with that. And if you want to know more, I have interviewed Ainhoa Manero of Stern Abogados, Sofia Mejail of CABR Relocation Solutions, expert immigration lawyers. You can join YouTube channel of Spainguru with more than 820 videos and 5,200 followers. Of course, it's absolutely free. Watch these interviews because they will give you even more context. In these interviews, I asked them 30 frequently asked questions to lawyers, okay? And there are different answers to the same questions, okay? And they're both right, because depending on the consulate, so you need to understand where to be flexible and you need to understand where or how to be on the safe side, okay, when you apply for this visa. And as for people who join afterwards, I remind you that after this presentation, there's a Q&A session where I'm going to go through all the different questions. Make sure to add a question mark at the end so it's easy for me to see those questions. And I will do my best to answer them, or at this point you are in the right direction. And this is absolutely free. Okay, and the only thing I ask in exchange, if you like the information I'm providing, if you think it's useful, please leave a nice review on Trustpilot. There's a button up there in the green bar, red button, that will bring you to Trustpilot. It takes only 5 seconds just to say, I had a good time at the webinar, for example. Or if you used Spainguru or anything else, you can leave a review about Spainguru in general, the services, and whatever you want to talk about related to Spainguru. Of course, if it's a nice review, it will mean the world to me if you do it. Thank you so much. And now let's continue. During the application process, all family members must apply. If you're working with a BLS office, it's always an in-person application, okay? And or pickup. Sometimes you prepay an envelope and they will send you the passport back by mail, okay? And some consulates only use mail. It used to be the case of San Francisco. Now they work with BLS office, so it's in person. But for example, Panama, it's by mail right now. And other consulates are like that outside of the US and the UK. But most consulates in the US and the UK, you deal with the BLS office. As we said, New York City still works directly without BLS office, but still there is an appointment at the consulate in New York. Some consulates give you the option to either do it by mail or by appointment. This is the case of Houston, as far as I understand, but it could be changing right now. And something to have in mind, the non-lucrative visa grants you a 90-day window to arrive to Spain, okay? Common mistakes to avoid. Not checking the specific consular requirements. As I said, check the ones in English, Spanish, and the BLS office and compare them. And also join the community and ask people who are applying or who applied before, because sometimes there are hidden non-written requirements. So it's better to prepare accordingly. Wrong or expired documents, okay? Supplying or applying with expired documents. Always apply within a window of validity. And recently, I read something absolutely crazy about San Francisco. You know that the medical certificate is 3 months validity. So this person applied at BLS San Francisco, and the medical certificate was valid, but had only 7 days left of the 3 months validity. And the BLS office denied this submission because they said that it takes them a few days to process at BLS and send to the consulate. And when the consulate will receive this, the certificate was going to be not valid. Imagine this. This is a mind-boggling, okay? But this just happened at San Francisco. So not only has to be valid, but try also to be as valid as possible if you want it, okay? Don't wait at the very end of the validity to apply, because you can get some crazy answers, maybe because this BLS office just started processing visas or whatever. But of course, you want to be on the safe side, as I said, and avoid costly headaches. Wrong chronology. I have interviewed on Spainguru's YouTube channel couples who got married in Trinidad and Tobago, Cyprus, and they thought that the police check was going to take longer, and they started with them. But really, what proved to be a nightmare was to obtain the new marriage certificate from those countries. So you should start with them maybe sometime. So be careful. This is an example. Wrong health insurance. Using health insurance with reimbursements is very tricky. Be careful. Or for example, you ask to a friend who is living in Spain, what health insurance you're using? This company is very good, very good. And then you contact directly that company. The company sells you a policy, and then that policy is not compliant. So, my opinion, at no extra cost to you, work with people who are used to this use case, which is people applying for a Spanish non-lucrative visa from abroad, okay? And that will give you specific compliant health insurance. And the last one, very tricky. Say that you plan to work, or you don't show enough proof that you were not going to work under a non-lucrative visa, or you don't convince them enough. This week, there was a denial from someone that was 30 years old that had everything, okay, and still got denied because probably the consulate said, oh, this person, there's a risk that they're going to work. So yes, these are the things that could happen. Timing. How much in advance should I start preparing before moving to Spain? Usually, US and Canada start 6 months from decision-making phase, 6 months before your intended date to arrive to Spain. And in the UK, a bit shorter, 4 to 5 months in advance. Most consulates retain passports during processing, something to have in mind. US applicants can get a second passport quite easily if they need to travel. And BLS in the UK may allow applicants to keep theirs if they prove that why they need to keep theirs, but it's very, very hard for UK nationals to obtain a second passport. There are very difficult conditions there, and applying for a visa at another country is not one of those conditions. And something to consider is that when you pick up your passport, usually you have to do it in person, unless they give you the option to prepay an envelope so that they send it to you. But if you're applying with a family and you live far away, and there is not that option of prepaid envelopes, you have to go all your family just to pick up the passport with the visas. How long does the process take? Documents preparation between 2 to 3 months. As I said, if you don't have any crazy document out there, like marrying in an island somewhere else, attending appointment on the 3rd month, wait for approval, average 2 months, consider 2 months, but it could be even over the official 90 days that they have as a limit. But it could also be, for example, Miami now is taking 5 working days. It's super fast. Same is happening in California. 10 days period if clarifications or extra documentations are asked. They only give you a 10-day period. So be careful when you submit. Make sure to understand if there is any risk that any of those documents is not working well, but you're still applying. Make sure to try to get that document and fix what you are submitting. And so to prevent being asked for extra documentation for those 10, because they only give you a window of 10 days to supply it. You can choose a visa start date in a 90-day window from application date. This is the standard thing, but not all consulates you have to select that date when you intend to travel to Spain, and you should consider that intended date should not be more than 3 months from the submission date. But this is not a requirement in every consulate. Officially, 30 days to obtain the TIE card or the residency card in Spain, valid for 1 year. This is the plastic card with your photo that you need to do fingerprinting in the police. You have officially 30 days to obtain it. And about timing, things to consider. You can ask for the visa to be valid for up to 3 months in advance, and in some consulates even longer. However, the difficulty I found was finding a health insurance company who will work that far out, as most only do 2. And this is true, and now actually they most only do 1 month in advance to start date, many of them. Solution, potentially. It's not that I want to sell you the service, but if you need to apply in advance, a lot in advance from your intended date in Spain, potentially you can use Spainguru's recommended exclusive agent, because it gives you the option to kick it forward in the future as long as you need. Okay, so this is also another advantage and why I recommend this professional and this service. And this is just to understand generally, for illustration purposes only, the timings. Okay, submission date is letter A. You can choose the visa start date in the form. You say, when do you intend to enter Spain? You can choose a date with 3 months in the future, but you could write anything depending on the consulate. And the consulate, depending when they grant you the visa or not, will accept that intended date. Excuse me. Then imagine that you choose a date which is letter B, within 90 days from the submission, and the consulate grants you the visa before that intended date, and they accept the intended date that you chose. So the visa on your passport will say that it is valid 90 days starting on the date that the consulate said is starting. So you have to travel to Spain within the visa validity of 90 days, and you enter Spain on letter C, yes, just before that 90-day period ends. And then once you enter Spain, you have 30 days to get your tarjeta de identidad extranjero, the residency card at the police station or foreign office. And once you got your TIE card, whose start date should be the same date that you enter Spain under the visa validity, you have 1 year before the renewal. And the renewal it's a period that starts 60 days before the expiration of the residency card and up to 90 days after the expiration of the card. In that period, you can do the renovation, although it is recommended to do it before the expiration of the card for several reasons that will be too long to explain right now. Another visual of the process, okay? And this is, of course, for illustration purposes only. And I say especially because I put this chronology of things, but some things could be before another. And especially in many consulates, the appointments are big bottlenecks, and some people choose to start getting the appointments even before they have gathered all the documents. Okay, so this could also, for example, come first. Get the appointment first in the future, and then start gathering quickly the documents so they are valid at the time of the appointment. But then, let's go through it. First, you have to find your Spanish consulate that serves the area where you're legally resident. Then you have to check your specific consulate requirements in English and Spanish, understand if they work with BLS office for the Spanish non-lucrative visa application, and check the requirements on BLS website. Collect necessary documents, start and check their validity periods, and make sure that they're going to be all valid at the time of submission. For example, usually you start with the background check, the FBI background check in the US, and in the UK with the ACRO. Then you will obtain a medical certificate, okay? If you apply with your spouse, a new marriage certificate. If applying with children, new birth certificates, you will have to get apostilles and sworn translations for all these documents. Of course, in the US and Canada, apostille not for the medical certificate, but in the UK, yes. And then you will sort out your private health insurance. Unless you're a UK pensionist, you can choose to use a S1 form instead. Book your appointment with your consulate. As I said, this can come before or after, depending on how hard it is. It's good to join the non-lucrative visa Facebook group from Spainguru, because people are talking a lot about how the appointments are working out in your specific consulate. And then you will attend the BLS appointment, personal appointment or consular, unless you're applying from a consulate that only works by mail. There is no appointment. And then once you apply, you will wait for notification of 12 weeks, maximum time, official time to get a resolution or answer, unless they ask you for 10 more for a clarification of extra documents for 10-day period. Then you will collect your visa, and travel to Spain. Excuse me. As we said, you have a 90-day validity period to enter Spain under the non-lucrative visa. Once you enter Spain, it is highly recommended to obtain a padrón o empadronamiento, which is registering the address where you live at the city hall of the city where you live, and then request your residency card, which you have 30 days officially to obtain it. Let's go back to taxes. Timing to avoid capital gains tax, or CGT, on property sales. A lot of people are thinking about selling their house before applying for this visa or moving to Spain, but Spain has high taxes on capital gains tax, and in origin countries, maybe those CGT are very low or non-existent. So potentially you want to avoid paying taxes in Spain on your property sales. The best way to do it is to avoid becoming a tax resident in Spain the same calendar year when the sale occurs. So selling your main property and becoming tax resident in Spain within the same year could result in CGT liabilities on the gains not reinvested in Spain. Of course, there are allowances and conditions to mitigate this tax, but the best is to just not be a tax resident when you do it. The best way to picture this is you sell in December and you move to Spain in January to fall into separate tax years, avoiding Spanish CGT. Planning your move. For example, if planning to move in August and stay less than 183 days for that year, you won't become a Spanish tax resident immediately, that specific year from January 1st, and you would avoid CGT for that year, okay? And plan your non-lucrative visa application considering previous stays during the same tax year of your intended arrival in Spain. What I said before, every physical presence in Spain counts. Yes, and then there are, as I said, CGT mitigation conditions. If you're older than 65, if you reinvest the proceeds into property purchase in Spain, etc., etc. Now, talking about the timings, what we said. This is a visual of what we said. The first option, you sell in 2024 and you move to Spain in 2025. There's no confusion there. You're not a tax resident in Spain when your property was sold. And the second option, the riskier one, you sell during the same tax year, but you move after July 2nd, and you spend 182 days in Spain, provided that at the beginning of the year, you haven't spent a single minute in Spain physically. And you have so much content on Spainguru.es, on the blog, and also on the YouTube channel about taxes. And I have a webinar every 15 days about taxes that I highly recommend you to join. And also I upload the recordings to Spainguru. You can watch them today if you want. And then after the approval, let's talk about the approval. Sorry, I'm a bit sick and I have a lot of snot today, so I'm sorry for that. Okay, living in Spain on a non-lucrative visa. Now, how do you arrive to Spain? You have two options. Either you arrive to Spain from outside Schengen area and you get a passport stamp. Yes. Now there's going to be a new system that is, they are always not executing it, but sometime in the future there will be a new system where there's not going to be any passport stamps. It's going to be like face scan and yes, but that will count as a passport stamp. Now, the problem is when you arrive to Spain from inside Schengen. For example, sorry, you fly from New York to Frankfurt, and then in Frankfurt you get a passport stamp from the German authorities, and then you fly from Frankfurt to Spain. You don't get a stamp in Spain because you're arriving from a Schengen country, Germany. Or you drive your car from the UK, cross to France, you get a passport stamp in Calais in France, but when you cross the border from France to Spain, you don't get a passport stamp. What you have to do is to get one-page sign called Declaración de Entrada by the police authorities or foreign office. And the police stations, they need to be close to the boundary or to the border of Spain, because a lot of people said, oh, I went to any police station and they didn't know what I was talking about and they wouldn't sign this paper. So make sure to get this paper as soon as possible. When you arrive by airplane in the airport, there's a police station, or when you cross the border, there's a police station nearby, so that you get the paper saying that you enter Spain, and that would count as a passport stamp. And it is highly recommended that you enter Spain within the 90 days visa validity window, because if you enter earlier as a tourist, you could face problems. What are those problems? Main problem is that when you go to get your residency card, the police officer can say, oh, you didn't enter within your visa validity. You need to get out from Schengen and come back. And once you get the passport stamp, I will issue the residency card. These are one of the things that can happen. So be careful. Excuse me. And then some recommendations. Get a Spanish SIM card because you will get SMS, texts because of the procedures. Open a non-resident bank account until you get your residency card. you can get a Spanish brick-and-mortar bank account, but as a non-resident, which will be useful to pay your rent, pay your bills, etc. And highly recommended obtaining a certificado de empadronamiento that is valid for 3 months. You have to go to the city hall where you're living and show your rental contract or property deeds or something to prove your address in order to obtain this certificate, which is the best proof of address that you can show when you show up for your fingerprinting to obtain your residency card. And officially, you have 30 days time limit to get your residency card. Frequently asked question, is the padrón strictly necessary to obtain the TIE? There are no appointments to obtain the TIE. What should I do? I'm going to quote a lawyer here. First answer, for the TIE appointment, in practice, it is not required to do it within 1 month because the appointments are very hard to obtain and can take up to 6 months without issue. Authorities are very used to this problem. This problem has happened for many years. The sooner, the better, but there's no immediate rush. And potential solution is trying to get appointments at different police stations. They have to be within the same province. And then, do I need the certificado de empadronamiento for the TIE? Officially, it is not a requirement. But, and big police stations usually know this. What they need to see is there is a proof of address. The police authorities, they need to see, oh, this person is living here. Airbnb receipt works. But some local police stations that are smaller, they don't understand this and they still require the empadronamiento. So if you have the possibility to obtain your empadronamiento, then it is better because you have a wider choice of police station to get your appointment. Now, renewal process. How and when to renew a non-lucrative visa. As we said, after 1 year since the beginning of your residency card, you have a period of 60 days before expiration and up to 90 days after expiration. And the financial requirements for the renewal. You will have to show double the amount for a 2-year period. You have to be a passive income or savings. And funds need to be in an account when renewing. And depending on the region, you will have to show a Spanish bank account. Some other regions can be an account abroad, but you have to find out that before doing the renewal. And then you will renew for 2 more years and 2 more years, total 5. And after 5 years, long-term residence. There is a long-term residence that you need to apply for, which is, it includes a work permit, but you need to comply with certain requirements. We're going to talk about that later. So there were rumors that the renewal periods were going to go from 2 years to 4 years. This didn't happen in November 20th. But they included a 183 days minimum stay requirement in order to renew your visa, which aligns with Spanish tax residency rules, meaning applicants would become tax residents. Now, there is a legal ambiguity, and I have a video asking Ainhoa Manero from Stern Abogados that said that there is a court ruling saying that in the regulation of the law, there cannot be this requirement because it goes against the right of movement that is included in the main law. So this requirement is not enforceable. So actually people will not need to comply with this requirement. But of course, I am not a lawyer and we're still not under the new rules that start on May 20th. So we have to see how this will evolve, okay? But right now, people are renewing the non-lucrative visa, even staying less than 180 days, which used to be a requirement that was deleted by the Supreme Court ruling from the current regulation. Now, let's talk about the case study so we understand how the funds are calculated for the renewal. There is a total funding needed for a couple of 72,000 euros, which is 36,000 times 2. Now imagine, how do we calculate this? The main applicant in this couple receives a 15,000 euros pension, which is annual income. It means that in 2 years, this person will receive 30,000 euros. So they still need 42,000 euros. They can complete this, with, for example, with property rental income. That gives them 21,000 euros per year, which is 42,000 in 2 years. And, or a lump sum in the bank of 42,000 euros in savings. That will complete the 70,000 euros in 2 years. And you will need, as extra documentation, ongoing private medical insurance coverage or access to public healthcare system coverage if you use Convenio Especial or you apply with the S1. But usually the access to the public healthcare system using the Convenio Especial takes longer than 1 year. So the first renewal, it's almost impossible that you can use it and you still need to use private health insurance. You will also need to show updated passport copies for both individuals. And now, yes, for the renewal, there is a empadronamiento requirement, depending on the region where you're renewing. Now, the time you need to spend in Spain to maintain your residence, obtain long-term residence, and potentially Spanish citizenship. And every renewal, as we said, there will be this requirement of 183 days minimum stay in Spain that lawyers say that could not be enforceable. We have to see. Now, if you want to get your long-term residence after 5 years in Spain with a non-lucrative visa, you cannot be outside of Spain more than 10 months in the 5 years, previous 5 years before applying for it. They don't have to be consecutive. You can share them the way you want. But if you don't comply, most regions let you renew for a third time. So you'll be 7 years with a non-lucrative residence. But some regions don't let you do this. For example, Galicia. And if you want to pursue nationality, most passport holders require a 10-year residency period before being eligible for Spanish nationality. And you cannot be outside of the EU if you're a holder of a long-term residence. When you apply, you cannot be outside of the EU more than 1 year consecutively and no more than 30 months in 5 years. And here I speak about the court ruling that says that really requiring a minimum stay in Spain for the renewal of a temporary visa, like the non-lucrative visa, should not be included in the reglamento. Now, some people also think about coming back to work after a certain time. There are many ways to do this. The most common ones are after 1 year in the non-lucrative residence, you can set up a business or get sponsored by a company, receive a job offer. This is not automatic, it is difficult, okay, but it is possible, okay? And then there is also the option of transitioning to a digital nomad visa, which is quite controversial because you need to prove that you have been working remotely for the previous 3 months, which of course should be forbidden by the non-lucrative residence, but people do it. And we have successful cases of people doing this transition. Excuse me. Now, pathway to Spanish citizenship after living in Spain. Most nationalities are required to spend in Spain 10 years and with legal residency before being eligible to apply for Spanish citizenship. But Spain has an agreement with a lot of countries. You have the map in red. Ibero-American countries, Portugal, Andorra, and Philippines, and Guinea, that can apply after just 2 years of legal residency in Spain. So this is especially interesting for dual citizens, for example, Americans with Mexican passport or Puerto Ricans with Puerto Rican citizenship certificate. And they always have to be by origin. You cannot just, as an American without ties to any of these countries, maybe you move to Peru, and after, I don't know, 2 years, you get this Peruvian citizenship. That citizenship is not by origin, it's by residence, and that doesn't count to benefit from the 2-year fast track. And now finishing, and before going to the Q&A about Spainguru, you can use Spainguru for vetted partners, immigration experts, tax advisors, visa and compliant health insurances, medical certificates, phone translation, apostille services, and peripheral or complementary services like bank accounts, money transfer, property rentals, even mortgages, and so much more, driving license, financial planning, a lot of things. And I just added this slide because I was asking this weekend people, a couple of polls. Did you use legal help to apply for a non-lucrative visa? 128 votes, 51% said yes, and 49% said no. So half and half used professional services and half did it themselves. And then I asked to the people who use professional services, do you think it was worth the investment? 77% of people said yes. So most of people are happy having received that professional help, and 23% said no. So definitely you can apply by yourself if you're an organized person. You have to be very careful, very organized. Okay, but definitely a lot of people do it, definitely. But it is also good if you have the means and you don't want to have extra headaches. You can also use professional help to help you out with this. And if I didn't mention anything here today, just send me an email to hello@spainguru.es and I will help you out to answer your questions anytime. And join the Facebook group if you haven't done so yet. Watch the YouTube videos and join the newsletter. It is all of these things are absolutely free and you can opt out anytime if you're no longer interested. So I highly recommend you to do it. The content of this webinar is for information purposes only and it's not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Check your specific consulate and BLS office requirements. Now let's go to the Q&A session finally. And if you haven't done so, if you want to leave a review on Trustpilot, there on the top bar, you can get directed to Trustpilot and leave a nice review if you think the information I shared today is valuable. Now, let's go to the questions. Is it the same to validate the NIE as it to register the NIE certificate? Walter, I really don't understand your question. NIE, to validate the NIE. So, when you obtain your Spanish non-lucrative visa, the consulate will write an identification number of you as a foreigner in Spain. That is called the NIE, Número de Identificación Extranjero. They do this automatically when they issue the visa, and it's on your visa itself. And for the rest of your life, unless you become a Spanish, and then they will give you a DNI, Documento Nacional de Identidad, you will be recognized by the authorities by your NIE. Okay? So it comes on your visa. There are procedures for $10, you can get your NIE before at the consulate. For example, before obtaining a visa, you can get a NIE at the consulate. For example, if you want to buy property in Spain, you will need a NIE. So you pay $10, you explain that you want to buy a property in Spain, and they will issue a NIE. And then you go to the consulate, you obtain your non-lucrative visa, and the NIE will be the same. Okay? This is different number than the TIE. The TIE is really not a number, it's the plastic card. It's tarjeta, which is card, tarjeta de identidad de extranjero, that you officially have 30 days to obtain once you enter Spain. Okay? The TIE card will have your NIE number on it, okay, with your photo and your address, etc., etc. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but if you want to write a new one just to make it more specific, I'm happily gonna answer it. Dirk, is the tax only on income in the applicable tax year or also on global assets? So you have taxes that are calculated on income, and you have taxes that are calculated on net value of assets, okay, like wealth tax and solidarity tax. Okay, so as we said, income, you have progressive rates that range from 19% to 47%, depending on the amount of income and the type of income. And you also have better tax rates for investments, for example, for 1K distributions, etc. So that is income. And then you have wealth tax, that if you're over certain thresholds for wealth tax and solidarity tax, that kick in depending on the region where you are. And then you will have to pay progressive tax on the net value of the taxable value of those assets. Join my webinar for taxes if you want to know more, or you go to Spainguru's YouTube channel, and I speak more, and I also calculate a specific wealth tax calculation for someone living in Catalonia, for example, just to make it easier for you to understand. Jeff, my partner has minor criminal conviction from 30 years ago. Will there be a problem applying for an LB? If it's minor criminal conviction, usually there's no problem, okay? But it is not up to me to say it, because what it means, minor, I don't know. Usually misdemeanors, I don't know, driving under the influence, smoking pot when you were 25, 30 years ago, these kind of things don't pose any problem. But you have to be careful. Generally, I recommend going with professional help if you have records, and potentially do the specific procedures in your country to delete those records. They usually take long, but it helps, because then you can submit a clean criminal background check, and that won't be any issue for sure. How can I rewatch this video? I will send you a recording, and I will upload it to Spainguru's YouTube channel. Okay, join the channel and watch the video, 100%. Dirk, for your address, do I need to travel to Spain and sign the accommodation contract in Spain, or can I use something like Airbnb to get proof of accommodation? That will depend on your consulate, okay? And that's why I recommend you to join the community, the Facebook group, and always mention which consulate you're applying from, because depending on your consulate, they will ask you, they're asking one thing or another, or some things worked and some others didn't work. But the thing about being physically in Spain before applying, It's not something I have heard of, although some people may choose to do it that way because it is safer to rent in person than not doing so. You can use services like Spot Home, for example, or Airbnb, that you don't have to be physically present there. If you use Spot Home, you have a discount of 20% in tenant fees that you can find on Spainguru.es. Walter, do I need double the amount if your pension is the same? I guess you're talking about renewals. So we did a case study for the calculation. So for a main applicant, it's 28,800 euros. So 30,000 euros for 1 year. So you need 60,000 euros for 2 years. If you're making 30,000 euros passive income as a pension per year, you are safe because every year you get 30,000 euros, and in 2 years you will get 60,000 euros. Now, if you have savings, it's a different story because savings are not coming into your account all the time. So you need to have the full amount from the beginning. Julie, my partner served a custodial sentence for assault 35 years ago. Is this likely to prevent successful NLV application even on appeal? I kind of answered this question for the question before. Assault, I don't know exactly. I'm not a lawyer. Sounds serious. So better to expunge it or delete it if possible, or contact a lawyer. Yes, and the lawyer, as I said, will check if that type of crime should be deleted in the Spanish system, and if it should be deleted, then they can make a case that it should be deleted in your country too, and they shouldn't count for visa application purposes. Okay, so my recommendation is go with experts, and you can find them on Spainguru.es. Clean criminal background check. I have not lived in my passport country for longer than 5 years. Do I need a certificate from each country? As far as I understand, you need to provide the police records from the countries where you have lived in the last 5 years. Check official requirements for this. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, if you are, well, maybe Dutch. If you're Dutch and you live in China for the last 5 years and you apply for a non-lucrative visa at the consulate in China, you need to provide the police check from China. Kelly, I'm retired with sufficient income for the NLV and want to immigrate ASAP, but my husband will not retire and be ready to move until December. Are my couples able to apply for visas months apart? I should check more into this. There are people asking about this, but I'm not very clear about the proper answer. How you can add a dependent, let's say, afterwards, how that works. I'm not 100% sure about this, but maybe you can join the community and ask other people in the group. And hopefully I will investigate a bit more on the procedure of how to do this, and even if it's possible. But unfortunately, right now, I cannot answer you this question, exactly how that works. Dirk, once you've submitted your application, does the consulate keep your passport until the decision is made? Usually, yes. But depending on the consulate, you can make a case so that you have to keep it because of different reasons, depending on the consulates. If you can specify which consulate, maybe I can give you more information. Jeff, if relying on savings for both year 1 and also the renewal for years 2 and 3, 4, 5, does the money have to be held in a Spanish bank account or UK bank only, as long as written proof? That depends on the region where you are renewing. People in Canary Islands, for example, report having to have the money in a Spanish bank account. Other regions like Catalonia, they said that they successfully renewed with the money in the UK. Definitely, you don't have to have. So yeah, that would be my answer. Join the community, ask for other people who renewed, get professional help maybe with the renewal with someone who is experienced in your region, because it depends a lot. Jeff, we already own our house in Spain and we have a joint Unicaja account. We also both have our NIE numbers. Assume all these 3 things will be all viewed as positive when our non-lucrative visa application is being assessed by the consulate. I don't know. I mean, you need to comply with the requirements of the visa, first of all. The rest is a plus. But you cannot use the value of the house for the funding requirements, for example. But if you're obtaining passive income from it, if you're renting it, then that counts, right? If you understand me. So yes, they can be seen as positive, but really, the first thing you have to do is to comply with the requirements of the visa. Can I apply for an NLV in Spain while my husband is still working in USA? Not working and he supports me. As far as I understand, the non-lucrative visa can only be applied from a consulate. So if you are living in Spain right now under a certain residency, you can potentially modify a residency type that you have today to a non-lucrative residency, as far as I understand. And I've heard of people who made the case for financial proof that the husband was sending money from abroad, and that counted as financial proof. Okay, if you can prove that you have had this support for a certain period of time, I would definitely search for professional help with this and asking the community before moving forward with it. All right, I think I went through all the questions. Oh, I have more questions here, but they didn't include a question mark, so they weren't included in the list. Denise, how do I get a copy of my marriage certificate? I got married in Nashville and I live in the UK. Who do I apply to? I was told not possible to get a copy from Nashville. Well, you have to get the original copy from your state. Marriage certificates in the US are state documents, and you need to get a state apostille and then sworn translated. You have to do it, as far as I understand. All right. I think we went through all the questions. I really appreciate that you made the time to join today. It is very early, especially for people in USA. So thank you so much. If you woke up early to join this webinar, and if you couldn't make it, don't worry, because I'm going to send you the recording either today or tomorrow. You're going to get it in your inbox. Always check your spam folders. And if you haven't received it, also, I will publish it on Spainguru's YouTube channel very soon, if not today, tomorrow. And always make sure if something I didn't answer, I didn't include in this webinar, you can send me an email to hello@spainguru.es. Stay in touch with me. It makes me very happy to receive your questions or any comments, whatever. And if you haven't done so or you plan to, please leave a review on Trustpilot. I highly thank you in advance for it, because it really helps me. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining today. And if you're applying soon for the Spanish non-lucrative visa, I will be crossing my fingers for you and hoping that you obtain it very, very soon. Thank you so much for joining today. Take care. Goodbye.